Amara woke up early that day, knowing her life was about to change forever. Moving to a new city was a challenge for her whole family, but especially for her. A dark-skinned girl who had always taken pride in her uniqueness, now she felt like a stranger in an unfamiliar environment. The city they moved to greeted them with cool autumn weather. Trees were adorned with vibrant yellow and red leaves, and the sky was gray and misty. Amara looked out the car window as they drove to her new school, inhaling the crisp autumn air mixed with feelings of excitement and anxiety. And the lawns surrounding it were impeccably maintained, but the atmosphere felt cold. She sensed it even before stepping inside. And the lawns surrounding it were impeccably maintained, but the atmosphere felt cold. She sensed it even before stepping inside. The hallways were filled with the noise and chaos of the first school day. Students rushed around, laughing, shouting, and pushing one another. While Amara anxiously observed the scene, the teacher who greeted her at the entrance was kind but seemed overwhelmed by the crowded hallways. Amara tried to muster a smile, but her anxiety only deepened. The classroom she was led to had a different vibe. It was as though an invisible tension filled the air. When the teacher introduced her to the class, a few boys at the back desks laughed, and Amara realized it wasn't going to be easy. She was introduced as the new student, and she briefly stated her name, trying to sound confident. In the first days, Amara struggled to find her place. She sat alone at desks during lessons, ate by herself in the cafeteria, and returned home feeling even more isolated. The hardest part was watching groups of students chatting and excitedly discussing things while she remained an outsider. However, she noticed something unusual. There was a boy in her class named Lucas who seemed different. He didn't laugh at the jokes aimed at her, didn't shove her in the hallways, and generally appeared detached from everything around him. Lucas had light hair and a serious face, which always seemed slightly pensive. Amara occasionally caught him glancing at her, but he never said a word. A small ray of warmth appeared unexpectedly. One day, a girl named Sarah from a neighboring class approached Amara in the cafeteria. She smiled and said something simple yet kind, like, "You're new here, right? How do you like it so far?" Their conversation wasn't long, but for Amara, it was her first real interaction. Sarah was straightforward and sincere, which gave Amara a bit of hope that not everything was as bad as it seemed. That brief conversation ignited a small spark of hope within Amara. She realized that there were people willing to accept her and that the key was not to lose faith in herself. More challenges lay ahead, but this was her first step in fighting for her place in this new world. When Amara woke up in the morning, she already knew that every new day at school was a challenge. She looked in the mirror, trying to convince herself that she could handle it. She gathered her dark, wavy hair into a low bun, chose simple clothes, hoping not to attract too much attention, and headed to school, ignoring the knot of anxiety in her stomach. The school greeted her with its usual hustle and bustle. Students walked through the hallways, laughing loudly and sharing jokes that had nothing to do with her. Amara quickly headed to her locker but stopped in her tracks when she saw her books, which had been neatly placed the day before, scattered on the floor. The covers were a bit scratched, and one of them was even torn. She knew that responding would only make the situation worse, but this was just the beginning. During a math lesson, while the teacher was writing something on the board, Ashley, one of Jason's friends, quietly tossed a note onto Amara's desk. The note contained a single word: outsider. Amara felt her throat tighten, but she simply crumpled the paper and stuffed it into her pocket. The most difficult moment came during chemistry class when, during an experiment, Jason and Connor jokingly pushed the lab table where Amara was working. A test tube nearly toppled, spilling its contents, but Amara managed to grab it in time. The teacher noticed her struggling to handle the situation but said nothing. Amara felt herself turning red with shame and anger. Lucas had been watching everything from the back row. He always sat at the very end of the classroom, where he could stay unnoticed. His blonde hair was slightly tousled, and he often stared out the window as if trying to escape the school in his thoughts. But this time, his gaze lingered on Amara. When the moment that changed everything came, Lucas decided to act. During chemistry class, after Amara barely saved the test tube, Jason said something mocking, and the entire class burst into laughter. Lucas suddenly lifted his head and looked straight at Jason. "That's enough," he said loudly, silencing everyone. Jason tried to retort, "What do you feel sorry for her?" But Lucas simply replied, "I don't find this funny. Maybe you should focus on your experiments instead." That remark silenced the entire class. For the first time, someone stood up for Amara, not just with patience but with genuine protection. Though she said nothing, her eyes met Lucas's, and in them she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Lucas couldn't forget that moment in chemistry class when he first stood up for Amara. There was something in her eyes, a mix of pain, gratitude, and surprise, that struck him deeply. He couldn't explain why he had suddenly decided to intervene. Perhaps he was simply tired of remaining silent, or maybe he saw in Amara someone who deserved better than humiliation. After that incident, Lucas noticed that his friends from the popular clique began to treat him a bit colder. Jason, accustomed to attention and leadership, couldn't accept that someone from his circle had gone against him. "What was that, Lucas?" Jason asked during a break. "Are you her protector now, or what?" Lucas shrugged and calmly replied, "I just said what I thought." From that moment on, Lucas started to distance himself from his group. He no longer participated in their jokes and increasingly observed Amara from afar. She was different, although she seemed to try to stay unnoticed. There was a dignity in her behavior that impressed him. One day after classes, Lucas approached her. Amara was standing by her locker, organizing her books. When she heard footsteps behind her, turning around, she saw him, a tall boy with blonde hair and a serious expression. "Hey," Lucas began, slightly awkwardly. Amara looked at him, unsure what to expect. "Hi," she replied quietly. "I just wanted to say, what Jason and his group are doing, it's wrong," Lucas said. "I don't want you to think that everyone here is like that." Amara looked at him skeptically. She wasn't used to such interactions. "Why are you saying this?" she asked. Lucas hesitated for a moment before answering, "Because it's true, and I want to somehow make it right." This conversation was the first step toward their unusual friendship. At first, Amara hesitated to trust him. She had seen him spend time with the same group that mocked her. But Lucas began to change. He started talking to Amara more during breaks, and sometimes they worked together on assignments during lessons. One day, when Jason and Connor tried to bully Amara again in the cafeteria, Lucas stood up to them. "Leave her alone," he said, stepping between them and holding Jason's gaze. "You're serious?" Jason grumbled, stepping closer. These words caused whispers to ripple through the cafeteria, and Jason, unused to such a challenge, backed down. For the first time, Amara felt genuine support. She began opening up to Lucas, telling him how hard it had been for her to adapt to the new school. He listened attentively, without interrupting, and there was something in his eyes that she had longed for from others' understanding. With each passing day, their friendship grew stronger. Lucas became not just an ally for Amara, but someone who helped her see that she wasn't alone. Together they began standing up to the bullies, refusing to let them dominate the situation any longer. This chapter concludes with a scene where Amara and Lucas sit on a bench after school, talking about everything and anything. For the first time in a long while, Amara feels happy, knowing there's someone who believes in her. In a school where an unspoken hierarchy prevailed, the friendship between Amara and Lucas quickly became noticeable. Their interaction didn't go unnoticed by Jason and his group. Their entire status and worldview were built on dominating others, and Lucas's bold decision to support Amara disrupted this dynamic. One day during a break, Jason approached Lucas in the hallway. A buzz of whispers spread among the students, as everyone knew that the friendship between. "What's going on with the new girl?" he began, trying to sound calm. Lucas, who knew Jason well, looked at him without fear. "It's none of your business, Jason. And by the way, you're way too invested in other people's matters." Jason smirked, but there was anger in his eyes. "She's dragging you down, Lucas. You were one of us, the best, and now you're becoming a joke. Seriously, the best. The best at what? Bullying others." Lucas replied, "I'm not interested in that anymore." This conversation was Lucas's open declaration. He no longer supported the popular group. Among the students, a real war began. Some sided with Jason, while others started to see Lucas as someone who challenged the rule of force. Amara realized that, after this, Lucas had it even harder than she did. Jason and his group openly insulted not just her but Lucas as well. One day in the cafeteria, Jason decided to loudly mock Lucas in front of everyone. "Now look, it's our raw savior. Maybe you want another medal for your kindness." In response, Lucas simply smiled and calmly said, "Better a medal than shame for your actions." These words brought smiles to the faces of some students who began to sympathize with Lucas. Jason, who was used to being in control, saw his power slowly wane. Meanwhile, Amara and Lucas grew even closer. They spent more time together, helped each other with schoolwork, and supported one another emotionally. Amara shared her struggles, telling Lucas how hard it had been for her to try to fit into the new environment. Lucas, in turn, opened up about his doubts, which he had always felt about Jason and his group. Unexpectedly for everyone, during one of the school events, a situation occurred that became a turning point. Jason, along with Connor, tried to mock Amara in front of the entire class. But this time, Lucas wasn't alone. A few other students who had previously remained silent stood up for her. "That's enough. This looks pathetic," said one of them, Trevor, a boy who usually avoided conflicts. This moment was a turning point. Jason backed down, realizing that his group no longer had absolute influence. In school, people began talking about how Lucas and Amara were changing the dynamics. Their friendship became an example of how, even in a challenging situation, one can find support and strength to fight back. The school event that took place that day was expected to be ordinary: student performances, small presentations, and preparations for the final part of the academic year. But for Amara and Lucas, this day was destined to be a pivotal moment in their story. Amara had long planned to perform on the school stage, showcasing her singing talent. Her voice was strong and emotional, capable of touching the hearts of listeners. Yet, she feared the bullies would mock her again. Lucas, now her greatest ally, encouraged her to perform no matter what. "Your voice is something they can never take away," said one evening as they sat in the library preparing for lessons. Her hands were trembling, and her heart was pounding so hard that it seemed as though everyone in the hall could hear it. She saw Jason and his friends sitting in the back row, smirking. Their gazes were as sharp as the words they often threw at her in the hallways. But something was different. In the front row sat Lucas. His gaze was filled with support. Amara felt that he was there for her, and it gave her strength. When the music began to play, Amara took a deep breath and started singing. Her voice filled the hall, drowning out any noise or whispers. It was a moment that changed everything. Her performance was so powerful that even the most skeptical listeners became silent. Her voice carried so much emotion, so much truth, that every note revealed her heart to the audience. They realized their power over Amara was crumbling. Lucas, unable to contain his smile, approached the stage to congratulate her. "You were incredible," said. They realized their power over Amara was crumbling. Lucas, unable to contain his smile, approached the stage to congratulate her. "You were incredible," said. This performance was a moment of truth for Amara. She showed everyone that she could be strong despite all the hardships. Her voice became her weapon, and her courage her shield. After this event, the atmosphere in the school began to shift. Students who had previously remained silent began to support Amara. Jason lost a part of his popularity, as his mockery now seemed absurd in the face of Amara's genuine talent and strength. Lucas became not only a friend to Amara but also a true ally in her fight for her place in the school. Together, they began to create a new atmosphere, one where fairness and kindness mattered more than status or popularity. After the school event, Amara felt that something in the air had changed. Her performance became a catalyst for change, not only for herself but for the entire school. Half students started talking to her, asking how she had achieved such a level of mastery in singing, and even offering their support. For the first time ever, Amara felt like part of something greater. Jason was no longer the central figure in the school. His former popularity began to fade, as his behavior drew disapproval even from his closest friends. Connor and Ashley gradually distanced themselves from him, realizing that their reputations were also suffering due to the bullying. Left alone, Jason initially tried to justify his actions, but eventually began to realize the consequences of what he had done. One day after classes, he unexpectedly approached Amara. It was a quiet moment in the hallway, with few students around. Jason looked confused, as if he had been thinking for a long time before making this step. "Amara," he began hesitantly. I want to apologize. What I did, it was wrong. I want to change that. Amara was surprised. She hadn't at first. She didn't know what to say, but eventually found the words. And Jason, if you truly want to change, that's up to you. But thank you for apologizing. This moment became a symbolic end to the conflict that had lasted so long. Amara realized that forgiveness wasn't a weakness, but a strength that allowed her to move forward. Lucas, who was nearby at that moment, smiled at Amara, silently supporting her. Their friendship grew even stronger, and he was glad that Amara had finally gained the respect she deserved. The school began to change. Students became more open to new ideas and new people. Bullying became a rare phenomenon. As everyone understood how important mutual respect and support were, teachers also started paying more attention to the atmosphere in classrooms, implementing measures to prevent conflicts. Amara and Lucas became symbols of this change. Their story inspired others to be brave, stand up for justice, and support one another. The final scene concludes with Amara and Lucas standing in the schoolyard after graduation, watching the sunset. I never thought I could do it, Amara says, looking at Lucas. You are stronger than you thought, he replies. This moment encapsulates their journey, one of struggle, growth, and justice.